Transportation Authority. It's about 7:05. Chair Randall should join us very, very soon. Mr. Davis, do you want to call the roll, please?
Yes, sir. Chairman McKay.
Present.
Chair Wheeler.
Here.
Board Member Crystal.
Here.
Mayor Wilson.
Here.
Mayor Davis Younger.
Here.
Mayor Rischel.
Here.
Mayor Reed.
Here.
Senator Boysko. Supervisor Harity. Mr. Bedell.
Here.
Ms. Hines.
Here.
Mr. Cole.
Here.
Mayor Wood. Mr. Lynch.
Here.
Mr. Brule.
Here.
Vice Chair Snyder, we do have a quorum.
Thanks very much. And our video is all working and all the communications.
Yes, sir, we are
All
live.
up and running. Okay, thanks very much. First order of business is approval of February 9, 2023 meeting summary minutes. Can I have a motion?
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Item passes unanimously. Next item on the agenda, approval of April 13, 2023 meeting summary minutes. Okay,
Moved.
second. Any discussion? All those in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any no or abstentions?
Stay.
And on that one.
Yes,
right,
only on the April 13th.
Thanks very much. That item passes.
Excuse me.
Yeah.
If Mr. McKay abstains, it doesn't pass, but he doesn't need to have been present to vote.
Uh,
Yeah, my normal practice is abstain if I'm not here to verify the minutes, but I can.
It's up to you. We can carry the minutes over to the next meeting. Would you prefer that?
I'll have the same
If I make
problem.
sure.
now. So I'll go ahead and vote in favor of it. I just don't
It still
normally do
wouldn't pass
that.
next month.
Exactly. We'd have the same problem next month, so to approve them tonight.
Okay. All right, so that item passes unanimously. Next item on the agenda, we start with presentations. Agenda item number 5, analysis of multimodal capacity expansion.
And Mr. Chairman, this is Monica. First, my apologies for not being with you all this evening. I'm actually at a conference presenting on MBTA's core values and how we incorporate them into our long-range transportation planning process. But having said that, just a few opening remarks about this multimodal lane mile analysis. Dr. Nampathiri is going to provide an overview of some detailed analysis that we've conducted over several months regarding multimodal capacity expansion. The key word is multimodal. And a big thank you to some of my staff, Ian, who compiled and analyzed the data, and Haroon, Shri, and Keith for their work as well. Lastly, we wanted to share this information to emphasize that, again, we are truly multimodal when it comes to funding projects. As you will see in this presentation, we do a synopsis of both the 70% funded projects and the 30% funded projects as well. This information will be a part of the NOVA Gateway. So we are going to keep this information on the NOVA Gateway. Anytime we adopt a funding program, which is every 2 years biannually, we will be sure to update this information. But we are keeping consistent with our theme of building momentum, as was the theme of our recent annual report. And having said that, I will turn it over to Dr. Nampathiri.
Thank you, Monica. Well, another is putting up the presentation. I will also want to add our acknowledgement to your staff from jurisdictions. A lot of this data, especially for the 30% projects, we don't have that kind of detailed information, but we worked with your staff. They provided us all the data, and whenever we went back for clarification systems, they provided us that support. So I wanted to thank your staff for this work. Next slide, please. As Monica mentioned, we are looking at the full picture, not just the 70% funds, but 30% fund projects too. And we want to bring some clarity on new multimodal infrastructure that is added in the region using MBTS. Some of these are hard facts that never presented before. So this is the first time you will be probably seeing how this analysis comes through and what you see there. And this is a capture of information at this point in time. As Monica said, as you adopt the new 6-year program or at jurisdiction level, you all use the 30% funds to fund more projects. We need to revise these numbers. Adding new projects means there might be new linear infrastructure added. We need to capture that. So we probably will be doing either annually or biannually updating this data. Next slide, please. Primarily 3 sets of modes that we are looking at. One is active transportation, second roadway, and the third is dedicated transit lanes. By active transportation, we mean sidewalks, bike lanes, multi-use trails, anything like that. That's what we call as active transportation. For example, also we have the second bullet there, multimodal capacity expansion with new linear infrastructure. What that means is when, for example, there is a road widening project, you are adding a new lane. That is new, that was not there before. That is included in this analysis. If there was no sidewalk and you are adding sidewalk as part of that, that is new. If there was a sidewalk while widening, you demolish that, put it back on after the new lane, that is not considered here. That is, we don't consider that as new. That's just a replacement or an improvement.
Of course.
So let's just say that the sidewalk that existed was 3.5 feet or 4 feet wide.
Mhm.
And what you put back is now 6 feet or 8 feet wide.
Yeah.
Is that considered replacement or is that new?
At this point, you looked at that as replacement.
Okay, so we don't have a real true
That's-
picture then of whether things are being improved.
Improvement we have, that will be considered as improvement. In this analysis, we haven't gone to that level now.
Okay.
But yes, if you are interested in that, that will be something we can add to this, is not just new, but what has been improved. Another set, when we say linear infrastructure, we are only looking at those sort of projects that I just mentioned. There are a whole lot of other projects that NVTA funded, metro station entrances, new metro stations, intersection improvements, technology projects, bus maintenance facilities. None of those are in this. That's not really adding linear infrastructure that in the way a roadway or sidewalk is captured. Those projects are not in this analysis. Next slide, please. Both 70% and 30% I already mentioned. There are some details of how many projects that entails. We have 122 projects that are funded with regional revenues. We looked at those projects and 50 of them are in this analysis. They are adding new lanes. 89 out of 257 local projects are in the same category. So a total of 139 projects out of 379 so far. That's what in this analysis we are looking at. Corresponding dollar amounts are shown there too. Some projects have both local and regional funds. What 21 projects have in this analysis have both funds. But if we do it in both parts, you will be duplicating. So we consider if there is both funds, we looked at under regional fund, not under local. And this covers the entire NVTA region, all 9 member jurisdictions, including the towns. Next slide, please. So how did we do this analysis? We started with whatever records we have, applications, project description forms, and so on, all kinds of information that we already had. Then we went to the project website, each of these projects, most of them have websites. We went through those websites to get the latest update, what is going on with that project, update all that information. And then we brought all that into a geographic information system or GIS system database. And that allows us to do a standard process of dealing with these projects and feature replicability. Once we had that database ready, we verified it with your staff to make sure we are not missing anything, we are capturing all the details. And then we did the synthesis for this presentation. Next slide, please. This shows the GIS map, that GIS database I mentioned. Based on that, we can create a map. Sorry, it's the slide itself, you're looking at it too small. The screen, you can see it slightly better up here. Couple of things. The 3 color codes we are using here: dark blue for active transportation, that's the sidewalk, bike lane, trails, things like that. Light blue for roadway, and the NVDA maroon color for the transit lanes, dedicated transit lanes. As you can see, they are all over the region. It's not focused on one part of the region or other. All jurisdictions have that improvements happening. You'll see the same color coding in the next couple of slides, so you can follow. When you see dark blue, it's active transportation, light blue roadway. So in this map, you can also see that most of the roadway projects, the light blue color is overlapping with dark blue, which means wherever there is a roadway lane mile addition is happening, almost everywhere an active transportation lane mile is also added. A sidewalk, trail, something else is also added along the way. You will see a couple of places that's not there. That's mostly freeways where you cannot add a sidewalk. Next slide, please. That same information in charts and numbers here. The 3 charts you will see. The leftmost one shows additions on these 3 different modes using the regional revenue funds. The middle one is for 30% local funds, and the farther one, the rightmost one, shows the total of both 70% and 30%. Same color code as I mentioned earlier: active transportation, roadway, and dedicated transit lanes. If you look at the rightmost one, the total, you will see that a total of 181 miles of active transportation infrastructure is added. 212 miles of roadway, 18 miles of dedicated transit lane. This is basically the BRT projects we are funding. A couple of things I want to add here. If you look at that active transportation dedicated transit line, that's about 200 miles and about 200 miles of roadway. There are this funding I mentioned, showed this in an earlier table. It's about 14 years of regional revenue. It's 2014 through 2027. That's what you already allocated. So 14 years of funding is what this is doing. That is achieving this improvements or additions. About 8 years of local revenues. That's 14 through 2022. The money that is already distributed back to the jurisdictions, which are projects they funded using that money. So that length of year where the money is coming from. And some of these projects are expected to complete only by about 2034, 2035. That's how far the actual implementation is going to happen. So these numbers are using a lot more years of money, plus implementation is not going to, you are not going to see this all implemented in the next few years. It will take up to 2035. Same information going a little bit deep by jurisdiction in this slide. And you can expect, as you probably can expect, the 3 larger jurisdictions, Fairfax County, Loudoun, and Prince William counties, are adding a large number of these multimodal infrastructure in the region. It doesn't mean others are not. Everyone is adding these added lane miles of roadway, active transportation, or transit lanes. You'll see 2 things here I want to point out. City of Manassas Park is not actually adding any new lane miles. They have projects that are improving various transportation facilities in the city, but not anything new, or not adding any new lane miles, as we described earlier, defined earlier. City of Alexandria, you'll see a negative number on the roadways. That is one project there, Duke Street Transit Way. As of now, whatever information we have, in 2 segments of that project, you are taking away the road space and putting the BRT line there. So that's a negative roadway line there. Those are some of the details that when you look at this point, you see. But as in general, you can see all jurisdictions are adding different modes in that jurisdiction. Next slide, please. So to conclude, what are doing this much analysis, again, it's a few slides, a 10 minutes presentation, but it went on for about 6 months to get to this point. You can see that all jurisdictions are providing multimodal options. It's a diverse region, and through our various surveys we did, especially in the last few years when we did surveys for transaction, we saw that different needs and aspirations based on where you live. And this kind of shows that the region is diverse and you are providing multimodal options wherever you live, not just one mode. You are improving all kinds of modes everywhere. And that's kind of supporting NVTA's goals and core values. Specifically, all members are adding new bike and pedestrian infrastructure. As you saw in a couple of slides before, close to 200 miles of sidewalks and bike lanes and trails are being added using NVTA funds. That's like for every mile of roadway added, equal amount of active transportation or transit lane is added in the as I mentioned earlier, this is the capture at this point, but we plan to update this and we plan to get this into the public realm by putting it out in the dashboard. That's all I have. If you have any questions, we'll be happy to take it.
Thanks very much. Are there any questions on that? Yes.
This is really interesting to me, you know, and in light of some of the conversations we've had about safety at the last couple of meetings, it seems to me we might want to know when these dollars are going to flow, when these projects will be funded, so that some sort of way to look at this out to 2035 of how these things are going to come online would sort of be added value, given that we are dealing with a lot of concern about pedestrian and bicycle safety. And the question I asked about, you know, what kind of standards are we using? I actually think it might be a useful conversation for MBTA to talk about what's a good sidewalk, you know, given different densities, what's a good shared use path, so that we can influence, we can't mandate what localities do with their 30%. But as we start to think of these things as networks and people get off the subway in all of our jurisdictions and experience different approaches to plazas and connectivity to walking and biking, we have the opportunity to say, here's what good looks like, in a way that we probably haven't done before, so that we're replicating good. And everybody's done stuff, but maybe the time is now to take a look. And I appreciate that, you know, plazas and stations and things are not part of this, it was lane miles that got us into this. Like, we need to talk about that. But honestly, you know, the plazas that we're building, the ways that we're thinking about bus hubs, all of those are actually, even though they're not contributing lane miles, they're contributing to safety, they're contributing to people being able to access these active modes in places. And I think we should start kind of adding that into, I just think this is a way for us to start describing how people can experience this, no matter which of our jurisdictions they're in, and what our expectation is for 70% money. You know, is replacing the 3-foot sidewalk really something we want to do with 70% money, or would we rather go to something like that would allow more people to? So just a thought, but it's a really good beginning. I'll say that.
Thank you. First of all, yeah, this is I would agree. This is a good beginning. This is good to have this data pulled together. And you know, I think the trade-off of in the city that are dedicated transitway versus existing travel lanes does present kind of a contrast with how we're looking at the active transportation versus you know, their inclusion in other projects. And so I do wonder if when we present this data in the future, whether we have the ability to break out projects that are standalone active transportation, where we're building a trail, building a bike facility of some kind on its own, versus facilities that are incorporated as part of, say a new road project that includes bike lanes or sidewalks or whatever. And I think the other question would be around similarly around the financial component as well. So not just breaking out the lane miles, but breaking out the financial piece of that. I feel like that that potentially shows a broader layer of the picture here that we're trying to look at, and it could be pretty useful.
Very good suggestions. Again, standalone versus mixed projects, that pretty easy to figure out which projects are standalone, active and
Sure.
The dollar amount is slightly difficult. For the same, we can do that. But we have received questions in the past that how much of around widening project is going into a development of active transportation and sidewalk, right? That is capture.
Yeah, and I get it. I think if it makes because of that, it makes the presentation on slide 4 only so valuable when you could be talking about a project that is 99% a road project with 1% dedicated to some active transportation, and then suddenly the entire project is painted like that. So I guess that's what I would love to see if we could pull that out, but I get the struggle on that. So.
Other questions? Yes.
Yeah, just very much related to that, because I was struggling with the same thing. I certainly understand what active transportation is, but I also understand that a lot of our roadway projects have active transportation components. And I'm just wondering how we equate them in, say, for example, your graph on page 8. There's not a roadway that we build in Fairfax County that doesn't come with pedestrian facilities related to it, whether they're replacing existing inadequate or whether they're brand new. And so a project like that would not automatically fall under active transportation. If it was a roadway project with a component pedestrian safety element, it would all fall under the roadway component.
No, if they added something new, so there was no Fairfax County Parkway.
Right.
The southern segments didn't have any bike or pedestrian facilities on either side, or one side but didn't have the other side, and you are adding it now. That is captured in this active transportation. If you had something, you just include it as the sign said, you had a small 5-foot one, you made it 8-foot one, that is not captured in this.
Right.
That's where we look at that as improvement.
Yeah.
Something else is already there, you are improving. That is not captured in this. But the one that was nothing and you added something new, that is captured.
Okay, so because many of them are improvements, and that's where I'm just trying to figure out. I'm just trying to think about it in terms of investment and cost in here, how you scrub that out of a roadway project. Do you subtract that from the overall cost of a roadway project to help
When
determine?
it comes to the cost, that's exactly the study we have, right?
Yeah.
And we talk to your staff, many of them, and it's very difficult to figure out what part of how much of that, say, a 550 million project, how much of that actually went into building a sidewalk. Construction part, it might be easier, but then when you are designing that whole facility, everything is designed at the same time. What part of that is designed sidewalk? That's very difficult. That's
Right. And I appreciate the data here for sure. I just think we also have to understand and appreciate those nuances, because I'm not sure it's painting the entire picture of the efforts that jurisdictions are making towards multimodal improvements. I don't disagree with Mary in terms of, could we come up with some standards that we would recommend? I would just say that in some of these projects, it's going to be wholly dependent on where they're located, what else is going on around them, what the densities are, things of that nature. But, I would certainly hope at a minimum, we wouldn't be supporting roadway projects that don't come with a multimodal component, even if that's a pedestrian facility. And not really clear on this in my own mind, what percent of the projects in here fall into that category, because I'm looking at the roadway for ones, but I don't really know, looking at those, if they have pedestrian facilities associated with them. Is it fair to say they all do, or is it a mixed bag?
If you can go back to that map that was up there, you'll see that probably about the whole region, I don't have it by jurisdiction on my hand, but for the entire region, maybe 3 or 4 projects are purely roadway. They don't have any agriculture.
And that's what I've.
What is in Fairfax, that's only part there, but that's again, going back to what Ms. Hines said earlier. We are only looking at new addition. Right, that our segment has improvement.
And that's a challenge, in terms of trying to quantify and draw conclusions from this. And so I want us to make sure we're focused on that challenge of the analysis, because we don't ever build just a roadway without looking at how we can improve the pedestrian facilities at the same time, especially when we have a right-of-way opportunity to do that. And even if that means converting a 4-foot sidewalk to a multi-use trail, those are improvements for sure. And how you measure those improvements, is an important part of why that project might have been supported in the first place by the locality. And so I'm only talking through this because I just want to make sure people understand those nuances a little bit better before necessarily drawing complete conclusions from this, even though this data is actually very helpful.
I seem to remember when we adopted one of the programs that we used those little icons that we have, and every project had all of those icons. So we do know whether it was brand new or whether it was a replacement and improvement, we do know where those are, that happened. So it may be that there's an appendix basically that just compiles all of those lists by jurisdiction, so people can see they're interested in Fairfax, the projects you guys have funded. These are the modes that these various projects touch.
If I may, so we actually started collecting that additional information. What is an improvement? How much of an improvement is being made? But it is, as obviously the discussion goes on, it's a bit tedious to get the full picture, and we didn't want to come to you with a half picture. So we can go back and continue to work on this, collect that data, working with your staff, and in future we can come back with that full picture improvements also.
Thank you. Additional questions? Yes. Chair Wheeler?
I mean, wouldn't you just be able to go back to the road-only projects and make sure that there were, and mark them as also having improvements? Because there aren't that many that are only just roads, right? Are there
No,
that many?
we'll have to go to all the road projects. As I said, if a road widening, before the widening, you had sidewalk on one side, nothing on the other ends, and you added sidewalk on the other end also now. That is what is captured here. If you already had sidewalk on one side and that got improved, that is so. So we had to go back all the projects, not just 1 or 2 projects.
Looking forward to however you solve it.
I don't want to be construed as putting in roads without sidewalks or improving sidewalks, and that's sort of what, and that's.
That is kind of a policy for all the jurisdictions now. If you're putting a new sidewalk or a new road or you are widening, you are going to do that improvement jobs in there. So it's not surprise that there is improvement in almost all these projects.
Any other questions, comments? Yes.
Thank you, Vice Chair Snyder. I hate to do this because we sent out a revised presentation, and that did not make it into the printed packet for this meeting, nor was it on the screen tonight. So Jonathan goes to page 7 to quickly encapsulate it. If you look at the total roadway at 206, Mr. Nampuri did accurately say 212. Not that big a difference, but given the detailed level of the discussion in this, I wanted to draw that to your attention and let you know we will be sending out, again, the fresh copy so that everybody has, the right information. I do apologize for that. Again, we sent out a special copy of it, and we apparently continued that mistake into the meeting tonight, which I do regret.
Well, thank you, Mr. Long. You certainly want our finance guy. I just got a question. Page 4, and I think it's important to understand it. If you go over to the last column, and take the first line, regional revenues, we're not saying that $1.98 billion was spent on active transportation. We're saying that of the total projects, well, what we are saying is that of the portion of the projects that represents 1.98 billion included active transportation. The other number,
Any of those three.
right, but the 3.121 billion is roadway projects that did not include any.
Not just roadway projects, that's all the
Projects.
projects that I mentioned, that several of these projects
Yeah.
doesn't have any linear addition.
So maybe a couple of asterisks, I think, to answer the questions we've heard tonight might be as we refine this chart, maybe the next iteration of it would be good. Just from the standpoint of a smaller jurisdiction, it's been really hard to get money for purely bike ped issues. And I don't know whether it's the criteria, but it's been really hard to get that money. Certainly on as a regional project. So I don't know where we go with that. It may be the fundamental legislative criteria, but I just wanted to put that on the record from the standpoint of my jurisdiction. But I think you're also demonstrating here that a lot has been done in this area. And I think that's the major thing. So any other questions or comments?
Mr. Chairman, this is Monica. What I would note about bike ped, I know there was 1 year early in HB 2313, we funded, it was, I think, bike, oh my goodness, the bike share project with another funding source. But as we've grown and really gotten our message out there that we are truly multimodal, you know, all of the projects compete against each other. And sometimes I get questions about, oh, why did you fund this trail or this project? Because sometimes people have a perception of what they think a regional revenue funded project is. And we remind everyone that all projects compete in the same criteria. And these projects are scoring well.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments on this item? All right, next presentation.
Yes, sir. Can I say a few words first?
Yes, you may.
Thank you, Tom. So we've talked a lot about safety over the last couple of meetings, and in my role, I've had the great pleasure of working with the VDOT staff, our NOVA VDOT staff, and learning lots more about what we are doing up here. I think I mentioned this last month, but in NOVA, 30% of our injuries and fatalities occur in the bike ped categories. And so it is really important to me that we focus in on this and recognize that we have need to be nimble and try to address things not out in the fifth and sixth years of any of our plans, but to have near-term money that is really helping us work on that. So John and I talked after the last meeting, and I'm really pleased to introduce a couple of people from VDOT who are going to make the presentation, who've been doing all the work. So Heidi Mitter is the NOVA District Bike and Ped and Park and Ride Coordinator in the Transportation Planning section. She's going to give an overview of some of the VDOT Bike and Ped safety plans and improvements in our district. And then we have, oh my goodness.
Jessica Perez.
Thank you, Jessica. It just went right out of my head. Jessica, who's also been working on doing the maps and things. And we had great boards at our spring meeting that showed locations and information, and they brought printouts for you guys to take home. So please do take them. There's lots of information on the web too, but we've got a lot of work going on. So now, John, I'll be quiet.
Okay, all right. And Jessica's our deputy district transportation, traffic and operations director. Lot to say for a title. And she's really been pulling together these programs and really implementing them. As you'll hear in the presentation, there are a lot of pedestrian facilities that we're working on and upgrading. And, you know, to the tune of about right now, $40 million over the next several years through our highway safety improvement program. So I'll turn it over to them and be happy to answer questions when they get through.
Thank you very much. So we do have a slide deck. And I will start off by saying that I did bring some flashing lights for each of the people around the table. They flash very brightly and can increase, visibility if you're out walking or biking. And they are celebrating the upcoming opening of the 66 Parallel Trail that VDOT will have a ribbon cutting for next week. So Jonathan, next slide, please. Next slide, please. So as Ms. Hines did provide an overview of, this chart describes some of our fatality statistics between 2015 and 2022 in the Northern Virginia district. As we can see, the blue is total roadway fatalities and the orange are pedestrian fatalities in 2021 and 2022. I'm sure we're all aware there has been a rise in fatalities, and especially striking is last year, the number of pedestrian fatalities reached 37 in the Northern Virginia district. And that is 30% of all roadway fatalities. And that is just a really sobering, striking fact. But the question is, what are we doing to address this? Next slide, please. So we do have some guiding policies and plans. I'll provide some more detail on some of these in subsequent slides, but first is our statewide V-Trans plan. It's a state transportation plan that guides transportation needs and funding to meet those needs. And the V-Trans plan has goals of increasing safety for all modes, having healthy, livable communities, and multimodal accessibility. Then second is our 2004 VDOT bicycle and pedestrian accommodations policy, coming up on 2 decades of this policy, which Chairman McKay kind of described for us, which is a policy that says VDOT projects shall have accommodation and or facilities for bicyclists and pedestrians throughout the cycle between planning and maintenance. So all of our projects start with the assumption that there will be accommodations and or facilities. Then we have our statewide strategic highway safety plan, which is called Arrive Alive. And this is a multidisciplinary plan that where VDOT, DMV, police, and other professionals across the state collaborate on a safety plan that looks at targeting specific user groups and their behaviors and crash statistics. And this most recent iteration of our plan uses the FHWA safe system approach, which the wheel is in that graphic there. And this safe system approach urges redundancy in our roadway safety, that humans are vulnerable, safety is proactive, responsibility is shared. So this and a lot of other plans and policies are reviewed and updated on a somewhat regular basis. And newly this year, there is a vulnerable road user assessment that is going to be part of the strategic highway safety plan that will be drilling down even more into bicyclist and pedestrian safety. The Arrive Alive already includes bike and ped safety, but this will be an effort that is ongoing this year in addition to that, and will continue to get updated in future years as well. Then we have our VDOT pedestrian safety action plan, which is an analysis report and map specifically on pedestrian safety that was created in 2018. And the map continues to be updated with further crash data. And the PSAP actually guides funding and improvements through our highway safety improvement program, which is this handout that I'll also expand on later. Next slide, please. So there is supposed to be a wheel here. Just imagine, if you will, a continuum of safety. VDOT really urges safety throughout everything we do, from planning and policy through project design and development, construction, operations and maintenance, safety for all users. And that statistic up there, John alluded to, the Nova district alone is investing $40 million currently and over the next 5 years, just through the highway safety improvement program for pedestrian and bicyclist infrastructure improvements, mainly spot improvements. Next slide, please. So our statewide strategic highway safety plan, Arrive Alive, we can see the 8 emphasis areas here, including bicyclists and pedestrians. There's live analysis on, crashes related to these emphasis areas, intersections, young drivers, the trends in crashes and how to specifically address those kinds of user groups. Next slide, please. The PSAP, Pedestrian Safety Action Plan, is a report, but more importantly, in at least how I use it, I really like to use the map that this plan created. It's a public-facing map that uses pedestrian and now bicyclist crash data across the state and identifies priority corridors for safety. So these priority corridors are in the top 1% of the state, top 5% of the state. And those priority corridors are determined using historical data like crash data and posted speeds, as well as indicators of what may indicate some safety challenges like population density and whether the households have cars or not, access to transit, et cetera. So that map is a really useful tool to helping improve pedestrian safety and guide the highway safety improvement program investments.
Hey, can I just ask you a quick, I've seen this map and it's really, you can just pull your jurisdiction up and look. And it's updated quite frequently, if my memory is correct. So you can look at it every month and see what's changed or what hasn't changed in your jurisdiction. And I do think it's helpful as you think about where you want to spend your local money, or how does the place where you did have a fatality stack against the other places in your jurisdiction that may have a history of fatalities or serious injuries.
It is updated periodically. So right now it's on version 3. Version 3 includes the bicyclist data, and I think they're working on version 4. Next slide, please. So some of the real meat of the concrete improvements that are happening and what's expanded upon in the handout by the agenda packets is the HSIP systemic investment plan. So HSIP is Highway Safety Improvement Program. And since 2019, VDOT has focused the HSIP program into 8 data-driven systemic safety initiatives. And I'm going to focus on the boxes that are pedestrian crossing and unsignalized intersections. Those 2 of the 8 programs have provided and are continuing to provide improvements to around 330 intersections for pedestrian and bicyclist safety improvements, including crosswalks, curb ramps, pedestrian signals, and some signage and marking upgrades in Northern Virginia alone. Thank you, Ms. Hines. Those programs are going to be completed in this phase in 2024 and 2025. And then there will be a subsequent phase with further funding for further improved pedestrian crossing improvements. So again, 330 intersections will be improved in the next year or 2 through those systemic initiatives. Next slide, please. And these maps show the overlap of how the PSAP corridors, that is a snip from the PSAP map, how the PSAP priority corridors overlap with how the HSIP funds are rolled out and where the improvements have occurred and are still occurring. So that map with the green dots is just the one of the 8 systemic improvements for pedestrian crossings at signalized intersections. Next slide, please. And then this, I'll run through some other initiatives outside of operations. We have, well, I guess this one is operations as well. Annual repaving program, VDOT implements in coordination with localities, new and upgraded crosswalks and bike lanes. And then there are several plans and studies right now. We just kicked off a Northern Virginia bicycle and pedestrian network study, which I believe all of the Northern Virginia jurisdictions are actively participating in. We had our first work group meeting today because a connected network is a more safe network. So we're going to be looking at connectivity and funding needs in North Virginia. There are also other programs for safety studies and corridor studies that VDOT manages every year. Educational opportunities. I've also brought these pamphlets. We have a regional safety outreach campaign that is managed by COG TPB and funded by Virginia's DMV agency and other state agencies. This is one of a few different educational and outreach efforts that there are in the region. Let's see, there's also the DMV Pedestrian Safety Action Task Force that meets quarterly, the VDOT Bicycle Pedestrian Advisory Committee, Safe Routes to School, where we partner with local schools on getting kids to be able to walk and bike safely to their local school. Partnerships with regional and local agencies. The TPB Regional Roadway Safety Program has funds from Virginia. We also perform roadway safety audits where VDOT and local stakeholders will go through a selected corridor, walk it, really look at what improvements need to be made from, a really granular level. And then innovations, we partner with localities like Fairfax County to do a quick build, so-called quick build, cycle track in the 66 parallel trail network that we're opening up very soon. It's going to have modular bus pads, and that will be in place until we get the final, more heavy construction done in a few years with a shared use path. So I hope this was informative. That is the end of my slides, and I will take any questions. And Jessica will also add more detail if there are details.
Thank you. Yes.
Could you talk to us a little more about the specific improvements when you talk about the HSIP signalized pedestrian crossing systemic plan? That is already signalized pedestrian crossings that you are improving through curb bump outs, et cetera, or those are crossings that need to be signalized that you will be signalizing through this plan?
Sure, that's a good question. So with the current phase, there's about 300 intersections eligible for improvements with that. And the idea is the funding level for each location on average is only $50,000 per intersection for design and construction. It's certainly a mixture. We have a lot of crosswalks already that are signalized, but we're looking to add as many as we can when feasible, when it fits within the scope of the project, of course, because we have right-of-way constraints, drainage constraints, a whole lot of other site-specific details that we have to work through during design in order to evaluate whether or not we can add an additional crossing. We also look at the signal chasing and the operations in the corridor as well, just to see how many of those additional new signalized crosswalks we can add. But we're certainly retrofitting the existing ones that are already there. We're adding accessible pedestrian signals, which are, many folks may have already noticed them. Some of our other localities and cities and towns already have them. So they're the larger buttons that have audible tones, locator tones, and good for the blind and visually impaired communities. But we're also seeing some added safety benefits as well, just with that voice that tells you to wait. So we think folks, hopefully pedestrians are being more compliant at these crossings as well as they get the APS.
And so the 300 intersections that you're aware of, that includes the ones that are just signalized as well as the ones that could use signalization that you were describing, or that's the latter is on the silver bucket?
So the current program is targeting existing signalized intersections.
And that's
overall.
the 300.
Yes, and with the second phase that Heidi mentioned that's upcoming, that expands the program to unsignalized locations as well, mid-block locations. So some of the treatments as far as that program is concerned in the future, which we're just kicking off design for now. So we're identifying locations. There'll be some mid-block refuge islands, some RRFBs, maybe some pedestrian hybrid beacons also, depending on use there and whether or not they need more.
I think that's great. I think these are all great. It's great work. I mean, I will say 40 million might seem like a lot in the abstract, divided over that many intersections. And when you're talking about improving the physical environment as well as managing the signalizing, I can say from our local projects, we are quickly seeing those projects escalate to well over $1 million. So 40 million over 5 years, I think it's going to prove to be a drop in the bucket. Not to put anybody on the spot, but I'd be interested to know what VDOT's overall sort of road maintenance or road project budget is in comparison. So I think maybe that could be an area of our continued support for more money to go to this excellent program that you two are leading. Thank you.
Related to that, I had the same reaction to the 40 million, but I guess the question, it might be for John. How does that compare to the other districts, VDOT districts?
Well, I'm not sure specifically, but in terms of when you look at the number of even signalized intersections, Nova typically has 50 to 60% in the entire state that we're managing. So I'm assuming we're getting a larger percentage.
Yeah. Well, specifically with the one program, the signalized pedestrian crossings that's ongoing, we're getting approximately 70% of that statewide funding for that systemic safety project. So even though we have, half the signals, we have a lot more of those PSAP corridors, which are the higher risk corridors, and we're looking to treat those. And there's more money in NOVA than the rest of the state, about 70%.
And that's all, that's all data driven based on the number of fatalities or issues that you have. And the important thing is when you talk about systemic, it's trying to get, a standard for all those intersections. It's not to bring them, to look at them uniquely. So the high vis crosswalks, high vis signing, and the other things that Jessica talked about at the signalized intersections, we're looking at it to do that systemically because that's proven to be effective in terms of increasing pedestrian safety.
Okay, and just one quick follow-up. That the 40 million is 40 million total VDOT dollars. That does not include, I know a lot of jurisdictions are also helping subsidize some of these improvements, and in some cases just building them, getting the VDOT permit, building them themselves. So that we're not really calculating that to really show the total picture of the investment made in these upgrades in the NOVA district. This is just the portion that is paid for by VDOT. And there's a lot more going on than this that our jurisdictions are paying for, that they're in the right of way, meant to build, improve VDOT safety issues. And I just want to make sure we're all in agreement on that point.
No, and that's true. And it wouldn't include our other capital improvement projects. We're incorporating all these aspects into those projects as well. And sometimes, you don't want.
And when we're looking at these intersections, the ones that are eligible, we're looking for projects that are upcoming also, because we certainly want to maximize our money. So if there's a conflict or another project that's going to come in and, depends probably the next 2 to 3 years or so, or depending on how major the investment is, we're not going to use our safety fund right now, knowing that there's another larger capital investment project.
Yeah, and it might be helpful at some point. It may be too big of an exercise, but really to paint the whole picture here is to get from the jurisdictions what they are investing in these type of programs. I know for us, we're investing $100 million in bicycle and pedestrian facilities over the next couple of years. 100 million.
Right.
And so I think this is important, but to Katie's point earlier, our jurisdictions are investing that amount of money in some of these bicycle and safety improvements as well. That's a number and a stat that we might be using to help motivate additional investment from VDOT in these facilities too. So it might be a useful exercise to figure out what that number is in the NOVA district that the jurisdictions are putting into these programs as well.
Well, I think the other piece of that puzzle, Jeff, is to talk about where the money is coming from that you all are investing. Because the thing I worry about, quite honestly, in the CTV conversation is, if we were to come forward and say, across all of our big jurisdictions, we're spending 150 million over the next 30 years, people would go, well, why should we give you anything, right? So I think that I've really been harping on the vulnerable users piece for NOVA and saying, look, you can't drive these numbers down if we, the state, doesn't put some skin in this game. And so this is exciting that we have data-driven ways and we're looking at corridor. We're doing all the right things. The money's not enough. And I think our part of the state should get more, obviously, than we're getting. But yeah, it's a funny little dance down there. I'll just say that.
Yeah, indeed.
Fun little dance. Yeah. Any other questions or comments? I just had a couple. So the $40 million in signalized intersections, are those just on VDOT roads?
Currently, yes, they are the VDOT maintained locations. However, the portal is opening up and localities can submit now for HSIP funding again with the systemic and spot improvements as well. And we anticipate that coming out, I think probably later this summer or so. So we're going to coordinate with localities as well and make sure we're ready for application.
Great, I was gonna ask you what time, so.
We got an uplift in what Anthony's gonna talk about. So we got an uplift in highway safety money. So now we can make it go beyond.
No, that's really good to hear, because I know my jurisdiction, it's hard to keep up with the demand to retrofit the 1960s roads with bike and ped facilities. I mean, it's just, people want it, and it's really hard to keep up with it from a funding standpoint. So the fact that there may be additional resources available was very well received. And hopefully we can carry this discussion into when we put together our legislative program. We can make sure that we're guarding and expanding available highway safety money. Because I think this presentation, the one chart that shows the increases, says all you need to say about the importance of this. So any other questions or comments? Well, I did have one other. If one wanted to get more information, what's the best approach? To contact you at the district office or Ms. Bitter or?
Either would work.
Either
You
one.
know, we'll make sure you get
Okay.
what you need.
Additionally, on the handouts, there are websites that you can go to if you want to learn more about the HSIP program. So there are QR codes and some links in the presentation if you wanted a webpage to read more on.
Right. Again, any other questions or comments? Thanks for a great presentation. We really appreciate it. Thanks. I don't know of anything more important than this, so well worth the time we're putting into it. Thank you all very much. You're welcome.
Thank you for.
So the next presentation is where we're going to get all this money from the federal sources. So that's kind of an important presentation too. So we have someone here who's going to make that.
Anthony's on the screen.
Excellent. Welcome. So this is a presentation on the IIJA funding opportunities overview. Look forward to it. Thanks.
Everybody hear me?
Yep.
Yes, sir.
Greetings from Richmond. And I know Mayor Wilson will appreciate this, as we're both proud Rams. I'm at the VCU Board of Visitors meeting and then commencement on Saturday. So
Ram.
go Rams. I met the new coach, by the way, Mayor. He's pretty sharp.
Got to beat Damien, right?
Anyway, I did this presentation at the event a couple of months ago, and Monica wanted me to run through it again, just to make you aware of what's out there, where we're at in the funding, and et cetera. This is once in a lifetime infrastructure money. We're a year and a half into the 5-year funding cycle of $1.2 trillion. And so the time to act now, the time to be aggressive is now, because once this goes away, it's going to go back to the normal appropriations, USDOT funding levels that will not even return to what you're going to see here. So next slide. So the 1.2 trillion spending encompasses what we existed funding, and then they added 550 billion on it. So the existing funding in the left-hand column, roads and bridges, public transit, airports, freight, water infrastructure, safety, research, port waterways, are kind of always the standard. And then you see in the right-hand column, not only did they plus up those existing ones, they added additional for power and grid, broadband, resiliency, pollution, low emission, school buses and ferries, electric vehicle charging, and all that. I know a lot of the states have already submitted their NEVI plans, and I know Virginia did. And then now it's going to be how we're going to implement and put these charging stations out on the highway system and in our localities and et cetera. So that just kind of lays out really quickly that I'd probably say we're a year and a half in, there's probably, with the amount of money, I'm just rough guessing, probably still $750 billion available over the next 3.5 years to pursue. And I'll break down later some of the buckets that may not make sense that you would pursue them, but I would encourage all of you not only to regionalize where you can, but as you're pursuing your projects, that you may look at areas you never thought that were kind of underutilized funding areas that may fit the bucket you're trying to solve. So you'll see some of that in the next couple slides. Next slide. So this is the state formula allocations. A large chunk of the 1.2 billion is allocated through Federal Highways Formula Fund, and you can see Virginia gets 10.1 billion over 5 years. So Mary Hines and John Lynch probably have that checkbook, so if you can check in with them if you need any of that money. But that's the formula money that goes to federal projects and the larger highway, Federal Highway 95, 81, that kind of stuff. Next slide. So here's kind of quickly the opportunities that you can see, and some of the RFPs have already gone out, and then the new ones will come out this year, and they're going to do this every year, and they already have started. So you can see a lot of the projects on here may fit into some of the buckets that you're looking at locally that you may not have thought pursuing, but you can see the amounts of money in each of these buckets: 8.7 billion for resiliency, efficient, cost-saving transportation. And I send a lot of these RFPs to Monica. I know she sends them to you when I see them for my clients. And so, you know, these are things that we'll be able to share, and I'll update this deck again to show where we are in the RFP process. But you can see, not RFP, in the grant process, you can see there's a number of areas here that not only is I know VDOT's pursuing, and probably Jennifer as well as some of these rail issues that you can also pursue on your local level. And so, you know, a number of these things that just put out the Port Infrastructure Development Program. Again, I know that Virginia Port Authority is going after that. They'll try to get their third in a row. So those are buckets that if you have questions about, we can dig into later on, or if you have any questions, Monica I can find out for you. Next slide. So again, this is more of the additional pots of money. You can see 36 billion, 2.5 billion, 350 million for wildlife crossing pilot program. I didn't ever think that was going to be a program, but now it is, to make sure that, you know, they're eliminating if anybody's ever driven Route 7 out where I live, it's deer hunting season year round with vehicle traffic and cars. So they're looking for ways to make sure that, you know, wildlife can cross safely without having, you know, accidents and things come off of it. But again, there's $350 million available. You may not have thought of going after that, but maybe you should. And so congestion relief program, obviously something here, and then healthy streets is something that I've talked to Monica about as well. Next slide. And so these are some of the newer buckets of the funding that's available. You can see Safe Streets and Roads for All grant program is something actually that I think maybe NVTA, because MPOs are eligible for these, should think about or look at pursuing their own grant for things that make sense on what they, you know, already fund and what we already fund, given that it may help enhance some of those programs. So there's areas that, you know, MVTA itself may be able to play, which would help the entire region. So you can see these buckets here. I won't go through each of them because of the time, but you know, the numbers in each of these buckets, as you can see, is significant. And so again, as I stressed, you may not have been looking to pursue something in these areas, but you may want to look to pursue something in these areas. And so, you know, going after this money and going after it aggressively is something that I tell my clients, and that's something that I encourage all of you to do. Not that you're not doing it, but I just wanted to give you the breadth of what's out there so that you can start thinking outside the box of the normal areas that you may pursue with raised grants or low-no or whatever it is. Next slide. So even though it says closed funding opportunities, they're going to reopen these things later this year and next year. So all of these, you think, like I said, are going to reoccur. You can see on that where I put the NOFOs in there, expected spring 2023, those are coming out now. And so any of those I get, I'll forward to Monica so she can share with the authority. And so these things will be year over year until the 5-year plan runs out, and then that's it. And so I think the point of this presentation is to make sure, you know, you're acting accordingly, given the short time frame to turn this around. Next slide. And then this is FAA, which doesn't really affect you, but it's the slide in there. And I know obviously with Dulles and Reagan and impacting everyone's jurisdictions, this kind of opportunity that I know that M was pursuing this, and also for upgrading facilities at Dulles. And then I know that Reagan's looking at adding longer flights from the West Coast and et cetera. So all of this comes out of this funding that the FAA is giving directly through airport improvement grants directly to the airports. Next slide. Was that it?
That is it.
So that's really quick. I know it's a lot to throw at you, and any questions you have, we can do a deeper dive, or I'm happy to follow up, and Monica can contact me. But I just wanted to make sure you guys were all aware that this is a significant amount of funding. It's out there. They're going to give it all away. So it might as well be given out to as many of you as possible. And I think that Northern Virginia is well positioned with this administration, given the delegation, given the two senators, Warner and Kane, who have been very active in pursuing these dollars, and then with Representative Wexton being on Transportation Subcommittee on Appropriations, and then Mr. Connolly and Mr. Byer and Mr. Whitman. So they're all very active. They engage, and I think that's something that you have to take full advantage of. And the only thing is, I would just try to stress is, where you can, try to regionalize your projects if you can share with Prince William and Fairfax, or Falls, City of Falls Church and Fairfax, or somewhere, because that makes it easier to pick winners. One of the things during my time at USDOT is we stretched regionalizing, and we saw a lot of this across the country where, for a city like Charlotte, all the counties were competing against each other around Charlotte. And so they only received one raise grant or build grant when we were there, as opposed to several. And so during my time, when we were awarded the most, is when we could have the most impact on an entire region. And I think that still holds the same with this administration. So any questions?
Thank you very much. Great presentation. Questions or comments? Let me just again clarify the chart that says closed. What you're saying is it's closed this year, but the programs continue for next year.
Yeah, so there'll be 3 more years of bites at the apple at every bucket that I laid out on those slides. So they already had the grant application process. It's closed. They've made an award, or will make an award. Once that's done, they'll redo it again this spring and summer, and then you'll see later on in the year there'll be additional ones. So this is going to be rolling continuously. So all that closed means is that the deadline for the last one is closed, but the deadline for the new one will be right around the corner.
Thanks very much. I was all impressed when I saw that list of closed.
No, you haven't missed the boat yet. It's when we get to year 5, then it's closed, and that's going to be a bummer. But it's a large, significant amount of money, and given the importance of the region and the significance of Northern Virginia, I think that and strongly encourage you guys to just go after as much as you can.
I just want to make sure that the reason they're closed, that's just a workflow issue for the federal government. Is that?
Yes.
I guess the other question related to that is, did they set aside an equal amount of money in each of these cycles? So should we feel like we have just as good a chance in the next cycle maybe as we did in the last cycle, or is it a diminishing amount of money over time?
No, it's the same amount each year, broken out by 5 years.
Okay.
And then closed only means that last year's grant application closed, that this year's will open. So they're going to do it every year. So year 1 was last year. This is year 2. Then you have 3 more years of the same buckets.
Thank you. That's important to know as well. Thanks for that question. Can this money be clawed back as part of a debt negotiation that's going on?
No, the good news is this money is untouchable. It's already been allocated, and it's sitting there for you to go after. So it will not be part of any debt fight.
Good. That's a good answer. I'm not asking any more questions. No, seriously. Yes.
Just a point of clarification, subsequent legislation could, if it's unobligated, claw it back. But I think picking up on the point, this money in particular was not targeted. There was some money from the subsequent IRA, the Inflation Reduction Act, some of the clean air money and clean energy money that people were going to try to claw back, and some of the COVID money that they were going to try to claw back that was not already obligated. but this money was not on the table. So
The-
that's not to say people couldn't try to do it.
Right.
Unlike a lot of years or bills, this bill created the contract authority and the actual authority to enter into obligations, and then it provided the actual appropriations in advance.
Mhm.
So you don't have to wait for an annual appropriations to actually access the money. The money is there, and then going to your question, and then each year they'll have that money to come out.
So the targets for clawing back really aren't in the infrastructure area. Is that sort of?
No,
Yeah.
no, I mean, technically, I don't know, if the gentleman said it, he's right, but no one's gonna touch this money because they've seen the impact it's had in their states and their localities. And so they get that it's necessary, it's paid for. So I feel like it's relatively safe.
Just about obligated, but our best prediction with regard to these programs over the full 5 years. Is that what we're saying or hoping? Okay, got it. Okay, thanks. Other questions or comments? Well, great. Thanks a lot. Wonderful presentation. I want to thank Monica and the entire staff for putting together these, having these presentations made to us all very important issues. We're ready to move on to action items. This is Alexander night. So,
As it should.
Is it every night?
There we go. I like that. Thanks for looking out. Appreciate it. Very nice.
So, Mr. Chairman, I would just note, we have the City of Alexandria's approval of their standard project agreement for the West End Transit Way, and this is for $2.2 million. That was a part of the inaugural 6-year program. The funds were appropriated in fiscal year 2022, and this has been reviewed by the Council of Councils.
thank you.
Mr.
So
Chair,
I'll entertain a motion on agenda item number 8.
Mr. Chair, I move the authority approval of the City of Alexandria's West End Transitway Northern Segment, Phase 1, Standard Project Agreement 2018-42, in accordance with the MBTA's approved project description form as appended to the Standard Project Agreement, and authorize the Chief Executive Officer to sign on behalf of the authority.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, abstentions. Item passes unanimously. Next item on the agenda, agenda item number 9.
So,
Yeah.
Mr. Chairman, this is the City
Yeah,
of, I'm sorry?
I'm sorry, go ahead, CEO. My apologies.
Oh, no, I was just saying this is the City of Alexandria. Again, they're requesting authority endorsement for their fiscal year 2023 charging and fueling infrastructure discretionary grant application. As part of the what they call charging and fueling infrastructure discretionary grant, fund up to $700 million is available. The city does have a charging infrastructure readiness strategy, and they will use that as their roadmap as they try to meet the city's needs for electric vehicle charging infrastructure.
Thank you very much.
Sure.
Entertain a motion, yes.
Move the authority approval of the letter of endorsement for the City of Alexandria's FY23 charging and fueling infrastructure discretionary grant application.
For a second.
Come on, Jack.
Come on.
Jeff should make the motion.
No, I think we've got it.
I'll withdraw and let Jeff make the motion. I want anything, but I don't know, wow.
Is there a second?
There is. Enthusiastically, please note that in the minutes. Hopefully Jeff will vote for the minutes next.
Any discussion on this item? Okay, hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed? Abstentions? Item passes unanimously. Next item, CEO Backman.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I will be brief, but there are a few things that I do want to point out for you this evening that are in the CEO report. Number one, the application portal for the FY 2024 to 2029 6-year program is opened. It opened on May 1st. It closes July the 28th at 5 p.m. 5 p.m. It is an automated application system, so it locks out, it shuts down at 5:01 p.m. Additionally, as part of the application process, we do require resolutions of support from the governing body. The resolutions of support are due October 27th at 5 p.m. So again, we just wanted to stress that, and we've been working with your localities and any agencies for any questions that they may have. Moving on just a little bit, as you all are aware, and we appreciate the funding for the preliminary deployment plan for the regional bus rapid transit system in Northern Virginia. The deadline for proposals was actually today, and we did receive 2 responses that we are reviewing at this time. Any questions on that? Thank you. So moving to the ITS Virginia Annual Conference, Mackenzie Love on our team is a member of the ITS Board of Directors, and she's actually at their conference presenting a poster competition speaking to the authority's Transportation Technology Strategic Plan. 2 more items that I will mention. Bike to Work Day. As you all are aware, Bike to Work Day is May 19th, and MBTA staff will be participating in the Bike to Work Day at the town of Vienna pit stop located on the town green near Maple Avenue. And the mayor told me she will be there waiting for us, or we may be waiting for her, whoever gets there first. And then lastly, MBTA's 10th and 20th anniversary celebration. Everyone should have received the evites. We did send these evites to you all asking if you could share with your board and council members. That celebration will take place next month, June the 8th. It will be across the street at the Northern Virginia Association of Realtors location. We do have the speaker lineup confirmed: Chair Randall, Delegate Watts, former Governor Bob McDonnell, a former delegate Dave Albo, and then former MBTA chair Marty Noe. So we are hoping that a great time will be had by all. The event will start immediately following the business meeting, and I've received a few questions. The agenda for the business meeting will be light. And Mr. Chairman, that's all I have this evening.
Thank you so much, Ms. Bachman. Any questions, Ms. Bachman? Not seeing any. Thank you very much.
Oh, Mr. Chairman, if I could, there was one thing I did overlook. Today marks the 8th year anniversary of our very first groundbreaking on Route 28. That is also in your packet. It's hard to believe it's been 8 years, but it marks that anniversary, and that was our first groundbreaking.
Next item on the agenda, chair's comments. I have none, but July Authority meeting date, is there some question about that?
So, Mr. Chairman, as we discussed the meeting schedule earlier this year in January, we were informed that the COG board retreat actually starts the day after your July Authority meeting. And it's my understanding it's a few hours away, and 6 of you are actually on the COG board. So at this time, we believe that the July Authority meeting will probably be canceled because we would not get a quorum. So we did want to put that out there. I did speak with Chair Randall, and at this time, we don't have anything pressing to bring before you to warrant a meeting in July.
Well, hopefully that'll stay, but if something urgent comes up, we'll clearly adjust accordingly. Well, that's all I had. Closed session, don't need it, as far as I know, right? I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Thank you. For a second. Any discussion, other than let's go. Thank you. I pass it unanimously. Thanks very, very much, everybody.